You're listening to the Rawha, Daily Guidance for Seekers with Shaykh Faraz Rabbani, who will be covering Imam Yusuf al-Nabahani's beautiful collection of 40 sets of 40 Hadith of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, as well as Imam Zarnuji's guidance for seekers of knowledge regarding the ways of seeking knowledge, Ta'lim al-Muta'allim, Turuq al-Ta'allum.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina wa Habibina Muhammad. Habibi Rabbil Alameen. Wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa tabi'in. والتابعين لهم بإحسان وهدى إلى يوم الدين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وألهمنا رشدنا يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah. We have been looking at the final part of Imam Zarnuji's work on the proper manners of the seeker of knowledge, Ta'lim al-Muta'allim, Turuq al-Allum, and this is a critical work because the very purpose of existence is the worship of Allah, is to know, submit to, and seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is not possible without knowledge, right? And that is not possible without knowledge. And knowledge is not possible without proper pursuit, right? Without proper pursuit. And the idea of adab is fundamental to religion, right? To religion. The great Indian scholar, often referred to as the Ghazali of India, Shah Waliullah Dahlawi, he says that Madaruddin ala ta'zim, the basis of religion, the religion revolves around the meaning of deep respect, ta'zim, right? As is clear from the Quran and the Sunnah. And that ta'zim, its expression is adab. Because if you respect something, you deal with it in a respectful and right manner, and that's adab. And we have some beautiful resources on Seekers Hub from the writings of one of the great living philosophers of Islam, Sayyid Naqib al-Attas. If you look for ATTAS and adab on the seekershub.org website, you'll see some excellent resources on this meaning of adab, right? That really all of the deen is what? Is adab with Allah and adab with His creation. Some adab is obligatory, other adab is emphasized, other adab is encouraged, but all adab is good. That's why they say, Man hurima al-adab, faqad hurima al-khayra kullah. Whoever has been prevented from adab has been prevented from all good, right? But adab can also be subtle, which is why the scholars emphasize it, and they emphasize the need to always review this adab. So we had stopped at looking at some of the did we look at the lines of An-Nasafi? Yeah. Najmuddin? Yeah. Yeah. So sorry, I got confused by the lines of Al-Hajjaj, because it says Al-Hajjaj, because he's called Al-Hajjaj because he made a lot of Hajj. Okay? I was reminded today of the lines of Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, al-Thaqafi, who was being given a hard time. He was one of the most brutal rulers in Islamic history, though there's much competition in that title, sadly. And the people of Iraq were giving him a hard time, so he addressed them in one of the most famous khutbahs, most famous negative khutbahs, or one of those famous negative speeches in history. He said, Ya Ahl al-Iraq, Ya Ahl al-Nifaq, O people of Iraq, O people of hypocrisy. أنا الحجاج بن يوسف الثقفي. I'm Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi. متى أضع العمامة تعرفوني. And they use this line as in Nahu as a proof for a Nahwi point. And then he says, إني أرى رؤوسا قد أينعت وقد حان قطافها وأنا فاعله. Says, I see heads that have ripened and time has come to harvest them, and I shall be the one who does so. And then he says, and I see blood gushing forth between heads and beards. And he gave a threat. The sad thing is he carried it out. So the author, however, after the lines from Imam Najm al-Din al-Nasafi, who's called al-Hajjaj because he performed a lot of Hajj, he says, in giving some practical advice, where's the siwak? Yeah. Yeah. والسواك وشرب العسل وأكل الكندر مع السكر وأكل 21 زبيبة حمراء كل يوم على الريق يورث الحفظ. So he said that using the siwak and drinking honey, right, because honey is a liquid, right, and eating kundar, right, which is it's a type of natural gum, right? مع السكر, slightly sweetened, and eating 21 red, dry, red raisins daily, على الريق, on their own, meaning without liquid with them, is conducive to memory. And this is based on tajribah. It's not a legal matter. The siwak, of course, is a very important sunnah. Right? Now, the underlying sunnah is fulfilled by brushing your teeth in any way that cleans them and removes bad smell. But one of the benefits of consulting the learned is that, so I mentioned that to Sheikh Ali Hani once, as we were stuck for several classes covering the recommendation of siwak in some text that he was covering. And he said, well, there's one issue, that yes, while brushing one's teeth fulfills the sunnah, conceptually, practically, there's many places where brushing one's teeth is recommended. Before attending a gathering of people, can you take toothbrush and toothpaste with you before you do that? Before prayer, it's recommended. Before reading Quran. These are all opportunities of fulfilling the sunnah. It's from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that he would brush his teeth before re-entering his house. Right? Now, it's not practically feasible to keep, even if you keep toothpaste and a brush with you, it's not practically feasible to use that. Right? That any time, the general principles are, any time one's going to do something religiously praiseworthy, or any time one is gathering with people, right, it is recommended to brush one's teeth, right, without being excessive about it, right, and in general, any time one's breath has changed, right. So that's why Abu Hanifa said it's min sunan ad-din. It's not the sunnahs of the religion. It's something that the believer does, but without excessiveness. So that's why keeping a toothstick, one, follows the specific sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Number two, you can keep a toothstick with you wherever you are, and that way you can fulfill the sunnah in the many places where it's called upon, right? Some of these other things of like gum, etc. You will see some things discouraging men from chewing on gum, and that returns to custom. Right? But here, chewing gum just slightly, because again, it's because you engage in knowledge by repeating things, reciting things, and having good breath is praiseworthy in that. Right? ويشفي من كثير من الأمراض والأسقام. It said, and it's a healing from many ailments and physical harms. وأكل ما يقلل البلغم والرطوبات يزيد في الحفظ. And eating that which diminishes one's balgham, one's phlegm, and moisture. Right? This is from the idea of the temperaments. Strengthens one's memory. And this is based on tajruba. It's not a shari'i matter. وَأَمَّا مَا يُورِثُ النِّسْيَانَ. As for the things that lead to forgetfulness, فَالْمَعَاصِي. The most important is, the most grave is sin. وَكَثْرَةُ الذُّنُوبِ. And much contraventions. Yeah, much contravention and sin. وَالْهُمُومِ. And worries. Right? That's why it is said from Imam Shafi'i, لَوْ كُلِّفْتُ بَصَلًا لَمَا تَعَلَّمْتُ مَسْأَلَةً. Had I been responsible even to earn an onion worth, I wouldn't have learned a thing. Of course, he would have learned a thing regardless, but emphasizing the need for faraghul bal, right? That one, to have a clear mind, right? وَيُورِثُ النِّسْيَانَ, right? Sorry, وَالْهُمُومُ وَالْأَحْزَانِ. And stuff that, concerns one and worries one, right? في أمور الدنيا, particularly of worldly matters. وَكَثْرَةُ الْإِشْتِغَالِ وَالْعَلَائِقِ. And having too many things that keep one busy, and too many attachments, right? So there's things that are outside one's control, and there's things that are within one's control. So the things that are outside one's control, right? You have to earn a living, you have social responsibilities, right? So you have financial responsibilities and social responsibilities. Right? These are outside one's control. And there's things that are within one's control. So the ulama say that if you want to make the most of your time, begin with the things that are within your control. Right? And in those, the sunnah is من حسن إسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعني. From the excellence of a person's Islam is to leave the things that don't concern you. And even the things that don't concern you, يسر ولا تعسر. Make things easy, don't make them difficult. Right? So ultimately speaking, there is no salvific consequence to your interest in the Toronto Maple Leafs. On the Day of Judgment, whether they got into the playoffs this year or not, won't have any salvific consequence. Unless you curse and swear at people or slander them, then that could endanger your akhirah, so don't. But right, there's some things that are more difficult to leave, because they become, right? But of the things that are within your control, get rid of the things that don't benefit. Right? Prioritizing the sinful, the disliked, the wasteful, the things that take the most time, and the easiest to leave. There's 5 things they say that you prioritize. When you leave the things that are within your discretion, you leave the sinful, the disliked, the wasteful, the things that are significant distractions, and the things that are easiest to leave. Right? Because sometimes we develop bad habits that are actually not that difficult to leave. Right? How many people derive a lot of pleasure or satisfaction from following the news? Say, yeah, that 30 minutes of, a CBC news report was just like, alhamdulillah, I felt so content. No. Did you really benefit from it? No. You just increase in stress. There's some things that are easier to leave. Yeah, so those are 5 things that are within one's discretion that one prioritizes leaving. Right? within one's discretion. Those are things one prioritizes. Right? Then, when one reaches a level of prioritization in those, then the other thing to look at, right, is that one, in the long term, one directs one's work responsibilities in a manner, right, that facilitates one's ultimate goals. Right? So, in choosing one's, one's work, etc., right, that one should not just be a worldling, that one only has worldly goals. You have some higher goals. What is your eternal plan? And what do you want to present? The return on your life investment, right, is, what will you stand before Allah with? So you plan your career accordingly. And of course, you can't, the nature of work is you can't just say, okay, I'm switching to something completely, because it's not up to you, right? But how do you direct your career in a way that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, فَأَجْمِلُوا فِي الطَّلَبِ, seek beautifully. And ijmal is also with restraint, with purpose. Right? Don't be excessive in it. Right? فَأَجْمِلُوا فِي الطَّلَبِ. Right? There's principles related to that, right? That where would the greatest benefit be? And you have choice of work, the work that is, that you can contain if you have other goals, or that is itself beneficial, right? And there's different, different aspects to that, and that's an area that one consults after having prioritized what's discretionary first, because they have much more control over that. But even within work, there's discretionary elements. Your lunch break is discretionary. Your commute is discretionary. What do you do in the empty time at work? Because there's always empty time. You're waiting for a meeting. You're waiting for a client. You have those down times. What do? The seeker of knowledge uses those down times to, one, to, not to get busied away, right? Because by external thoughts, and tries to insert beneficial knowledge in that. One of my teachers at work, he said, and may Allah bless him, he'd recite at least one juz, sometimes two, while at work. The medical doctor, not like some, just like, why? He said between patients here and there, like if you're working 9 hours, you easily fit in lots of stuff. Right? And that's part of, and then with the other component, one's social responsibilities, right? The way one makes time in that is that one should know what is one responsible for. Because a lot of what we do socially is that our social responsibilities are religious responsibilities. They're religious obligations and religious opportunities. Right? A lot of what we do is we just socialize. We socialize with family, we socialize with friends, but we neither fulfill rights nor do we do good. Right? We just hang out. And a lot of it's rather, it's unsatisfying and it's not particularly beneficial. Right? So how one fulfills those rights, that one fulfills the rights and one tries to do so with excellence, but not in a wasteful time. Right? And that's where knowing what the rights of parents, family, and others are is critical for a seeker of knowledge. Shaykh Hassan al-Hindi made this point. I asked him, that how do you you're always teaching, but it looks like you have good relations with family and people. He said, because I always stay in touch with everybody. May Allah forgive us. And, but I know what their rights are. I give them their rights and more. And, and they know that I'm busy doing stuff, so they give me my space. Right? Like there's no sunnah to stay at a wedding for 4 hours. The sunnah is to partake in the wedding, to share in someone's happiness. But that's an opportunity. There's an aspect of what fulfills the right and what does good in that relationship. Right? In a way that will be pleasing to Allah. Right? So, and if you look at it that way, a lot of us say, oh, weekends I have to visit my parents. So you visit your parents, but go try to do good there. Right? Do good and then move on. It actually saves you from a lot of drama and controversy and politics and other things. So these and attachments. So that's sort of the like a framework that the ulama mentioned in terms of reducing one's worldly concerns and the things that busy one away. And then he says, وَكُلُّ مَا يَزِيدُ فِي الْبَلْغَمِ يُورِثُ النِّسْيَانِ وَقَدْ ذَكَّرْنَا. And he says, and everything that increases one's phlegm is said to increase one's forgetfulness. And he says, وَقَدْ ذَكَرْنَا أَنَّهُ لَا يَنبَغِي لِلْعَاقِلِ أَنْ يَهْتَمَّ لِأَمْرِ الدُّنْيَا. It says, and we've mentioned before, that it does not befit an intelligent person to be concerned about worldly matters. Meaning, ham here refers to make it their primary concern. Right? We've been commanded to follow the way of Sayyidina Ibrahim, who said, لا أحب الآفلين. I do not love things that are perishing. I love not the perishing. Right? وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. The next life is better for you than this. So why would you prioritize the fleeting over the lasting? لأنه يضر ولا ينفع. Because it harms and does not benefit. Particularly dunya, in the sense of anything that busies you away from Allah. وهموم الدنيا لا تخلو عن ظلمة في القلب. And the worries and worldly worries are never free of darkness that affects the heart. Right? Because the essence of worldliness is that it busies you away from Allah. Right? And anything that does not busy you away from Allah is not from worldliness. Right? وهموم الآخرة لا تخلو عن النور في القلب. And the matters and the concerns of the next life are never free of light within the heart. ويظهر أثره في الصلاة. And the trace of this is found in the prayer. And that's why they say it's the barometer of the believer. وهم الدنيا يمنعه عن الخير. And worldly concerns busy one from the good. And ham here is used, right, in that which is one's primary concern. Right? One's primary concern. Right? And worldly concern, meaning prioritizing the worldly, prevents one from the good. وَهَمُّ الْآخِرَةِ يَحْمِلُهُ عَلَيْهِ. Concern for the hereafter directs one from the good. Because if your primary concern is, what will be pleasing to Allah? What will I present to Allah on the last day? Then any opportunity of good, you'll rush to it. وَالْإِشْتِغَالُ بِالصَّلَاةِ عَلَى الْخُشُوعِ وَتَحْصِيلُ الْعِلْمِ يَنْفِي الْهَمِّ. And busying oneself with prayer, with khushu', with humility, with humbling oneself, right? With reverent awe. And busying oneself with attaining knowledge negates worry, wal-huzn, and this worldly sorrow. Right? كما قال الشيخ الإمام نصر بن حسن al-Marghinani fi qasidatin lahu, as mentioned by the Shaykh, the Imam Nasr ibn al-Hasan al-Marghinani, which is other than the author of the Hidayah, in a poem of his. Right? And this is a command in the Quran, right? Right? With respect to the prayer, ista'inu bis-sabri was-salah. Seek assistance in patience and prayer. So that if one has worries, turn to prayer. That's number one. The other is that it has come in the Sunnah, right? That directly about seeking knowledge, that Allah, there's three categories of people for whom Allah has taken care Himself of their provision. And one of them is the seeker of knowledge until they've returned. Right? Another is the person who marries, seeking to restrain themselves in a dignified manner. Right? And this great scholar, Nasr ibn al-Hasan, advised himself. Right? And that's the adab of advice, that when you advise others, you intend yourself first. And if you do so, the advice will benefit them and you. Whereas if you advise people, but don't feel yourself addressed of that advice will be a case against you, and they won't benefit from it. Okay? They mention one of the great scholars of Damascus, and you can find a biography of his in, it's one of the first biographies in the Reliance of the Traveler, Shaykh Ali Daqar, from early in the 20th century. He used to give really, really powerful khutbahs, shockingly powerful. He used to call out people, "O you who have turned away from your Lord, O you who claim to be a believer, but harbor only hypocrisy, O you who are corrupt, and people would cry and wail and repent and return to Allah through his khutbahs and his sermons. So one of his students used to attend these khutbahs. And then he returned back after studies to his hometown, and he decided to do the same thing. But he started going, "Oh, you who have turned from your Lord. Oh, you who are, who harbor hypocrisy. Oh, you who this." And he hadn't even finished the khutbah when they dragged him down from the mimbar and they beat him up. "Who are you calling a hypocrite? Who are you calling, corrupt?" And they beat him up. So poor man returned to Damascus and went to his sheikh, and he was like all wounded. And they said, "What happened?" He said, "Sheikh, they asked me to give khutbah, so I just repeated what you say. But people return to Allah and are moved by your khutbah. As for my khutbah, they beat me up." They said, "My son, the difference is that when I am talking to them, I'm addressing myself first and then them. And I'm not paying attention to them. So when I say, 'Oh, you have turned to Allah,' I'm talking to myself. When I say, 'Oh, you who claim faith but harbor nothing but hypocrisy,' I'm talking to myself. So I benefit from my admonition, and because I benefit, others do as well, by the barakah of the sincerity in it. As for you, you are just putting everyone down, and no one wants to be put down." So it's in that spirit that Nasr ibn al-Hasan says, "اعتني نصر بن حسن بكل علم يختزن ذاك الذي ينفي الحزن وغيره لا يؤتمن." He says, "Be concerned, O Nasr ibn Hasan, with every knowledge that is worth retaining. That is what negates sorrow. And other than that cannot be trusted." Right? And what is true knowledge? True knowledge is knowledge of the heart. True knowledge is that which draws you closer to Allah. And if you are drawing closer to Allah, you are drawing closer to contentment. Other than that, it is takathur, even if it appears to be knowledge. Right? You gain knowledge of a lot of religious information, but if it isn't of that which draws you closer to Allah, what is it? It cannot be trusted to bring contentment. Right? Right? That's why the ulama give many definitions of al-ilm al-nafi', of beneficial knowledge that the Prophet ﷺ asked for. One of them is ilmu ma yuqarribuka ila Allah, knowledge of that which will draw you closer to Allah. وقال الإمام الأجل نجم الدين بن عمر بن محمد النسفي في ولد له سلام على من تيمتني بطرفها ولمعة خدها ولمعة طرفها سبتني وأصبتني فتاة مليحة تحيرت الأوهام في كنه وصفها فقلت ذريني وعذريني فإني شغفت بتحصيل العلوم وكشفها. Right? So this great scholar, Imam Najmuddin Umar ibn Muhammad al-Nasafi, said with respect to an walad, a slave that he had, from whom he had a child. So she's akin to being a wife of his. Greetings be to the one who dazzled me by her gaze and by the radiance of her cheeks and by the light of her glance. She captured me and raptured, and she put me in a trance. This beautiful young woman, and she dazzled my imagination in trying to understand her beautiful qualities. So I said to her, "Leave me and excuse me, because I have been taken by the attainment of knowledge and uncovering it. ولي في طلاب العلم والفضل والتقى غنى عن غناء الغانيات وعرفها." It says, and I have in the pursuit of knowledge and virtue and piety no need from the singing of those who would sing sweet melodies and their sweet scents, right? Because she presumably wanted more of his attention and company, and he said, "I'm sorry, I have more important things to take care of." And many wrote this, about this, and we'll just close the section. أما أسباب النسيان العلم فأكل الكزبرة الرطبة وأكل التفاح الحامض والنظر إلى المصلوب وقراءة لوح القبور. It says, as for some of the things that are said to bequeath, to cause forgetfulness of knowledge, is eating, what's kuzbura? Coriander, but fresh coriander, and eating sour apples, and look at people who are crucified, and reading gravestones. والمرور بين قطار الجمال, and to go by mountain passes. وإلقاء القمل الحي على الأرض, right? And throwing the qummal, which is the what do you get in the hair? What don't you get in the hair? Like lice, and to throw living lice on the ground. والحجامة على نقرة القفا, and to cup at the base of the neck. And this, it's said, كلها تورث اللسان. All these are said to cause forgetfulness, right? Some of them because they will distract, right? Or they could affect your temperament, right? If you eat the wrong kind of thing. But none of these are shar'i manhaj. Someone's always, if you're supposed to be seeking knowledge, we're always hanging out in the graveyard, reading about who's where. And people are fascinated by that. One of the big Egyptian scholars, I was listening to this lesson of his, and he knows a lot about the history of Cairo. So in this lesson at the end, first question he got, is it true that Sheikh so-and-so is buried in such and such graveyard behind so-and-so? He says, Sahih, and he gave a little biography. Then a couple other questions, then another question, is it true that so-and-so is buried in such and such graveyard? He says, yes, and blah, 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 he gave some details. The third question said, excuse me guys, what do you think I do when I'm not teaching you guys? Am I the custodian of the graves of Cairo? Right? It says, be avid for what benefits you. Okay? So some of these, there's contextual reasons, right? That because if you take lice out of your hair, kill them. If you just throw it, it's going to go hurt someone else, right? So there's the hijama, you have to be careful. There's a right way to get cupping, right? And there's wrong ways. I have a friend who went to get cupping. He didn't go to the right kind of person to get cupping. and he got it done in a way that is in traditional medicine is discouraged, and he also had a weak temperament, right? So it was probably not good for him. He had problems with his energy level, so he got the cupping and he fainted for a better part of a day. I was kind of relieved because we used to argue all the time, but I felt bad about it. But there's a right way to do something, right? So if you get, there's something, you get cupping done, and cupping ultimately, although it's good for you, if you get cupping done too much, right, it can weaken you too. Right? Some of these things is a right way of doing it. But these are contextual things. Next session, we're going to look at some of the things that facilitate provision and that bless one's life. And many of these are based on experience, but the key thing is the idea of being avid for all that will benefit one, right, and will increase one in the good, and caution about everything that would distract one from what is most important. Right? So you look at the fact that the seeker of knowledge needs to take the means of having a livelihood, right? And there's a personal aspect to that, and there's a collective aspect. That as a community, we have to ensure that we are facilitating the means for students to study, right? Because that is a fard kifaya. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitate for us to make the right personal choices and the right collective choices. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Thank you for listening to the Rawha, Daily Guidance for Seekers with Shaykh Faraz Rabbani. Help Seekers Hub give light to millions around the world by supporting us through monthly donations by going to seekershub.org/donate. Your donations are tax deductible in the US and Canada.